All right, I am here with Miss Erica Greer. Say hello.
Hey.
And we are going to do a quick discussion of Black Panther and how it relates to immigration. So, one thing that did you recognize anything immigrant related in the movie?
Um, I would say that when the characters, uh, Killmonger, when he and his father were in Oakland in the '90s, it's like I didn't think about it until now, but yeah, they went from Wakanda to Oakland, so they came to America basically and migrated. So yeah, that was an example of immigration in the film.
Now it's funny though, is that like they went to Oakland,
Right.
and Oakland is like one of the poor cities.
Poorest cities
So,
I've ever been to. Yeah.
and when you notice like a lot of immigrant stories, they end up going. They end up going to like these poor cities, and that's why they get the reputation that they get, And that's something that I thought was kind of interesting. Like like East LA is full of
Yeah.
the immigrants from Mexico,
Yeah.
or like Miami, that Cayocho is where a lot of the Cubans come from when they immigrate. So
Part of that is because if you're coming from a completely different environment and you don't have your next country's resources per se, you are starting, as Drake would say, starting from the bottom. You kind of have to
yeah,
find the bottom because it's realistically, it's kind of hard for people that are citizens here to thrive
yeah.
and strive in the upper crust of society. You have to build something to get there, and unfortunately that's kind of the avenue that immigrants have to take.
Right. That's what that's what I was thinking about. And I was also thinking about how like the story starts off with, like you said, his brother immigrating to Oakland, but what he's doing there is he is stealing the vibranium that's coming from Wakanda and selling it as weapons in the U.S.
Shady.
So that's kind of, yeah, really though, and that's what I think. Transitioning into like how it, how does this all relate? Why does this matter? What I thought was funny is like, I think it was last year when President Trump was talking about, this was during his campaign, so it would have had to have been last year, and he was talking about how the Mexicans, are sending us their worst. They always send us the criminals, and it's kind of like a not an overt thing, but it does relate.
It's interesting that it parallels what he said because so many of us, myself included, were completely offended by something that was so
Like out there.
yeah, it was such a careless choice of words, and for someone that is claiming to love this country, want to elevate a country that is normally celebrated for the fact that we are a melting pot of migration.
Yeah.
But then you look at a movie like Black Panther, interestingly enough, exemplifying this statement that he made, and then you have to sit back for a second and go, there
Right.
is some truth to what was said, even if it was quite offensive.
Right, and that's why it was so funny. That's the first thing I picked out, because I was like, I don't think they meant for this to be the statement, but it definitely like came out.
That statement, yeah.
But the funny thing about like immigrants, when you think about America, you don't even think about like some of the pioneers that have actually become immigrants. Like Desi Arnaz,
Right.
first Cuban immigrant,
Right.
and this was like back in the 50s
Like
and 60s.
50s, yeah.
Yeah, so like they were never playing. There was never a blended family like that on TV. When you think of I Love Lucy, and Rita Moreno, of course,
Well,
with
maybe not blended interracial, but I get what you're saying.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
So, Rita Moreno, like I was saying, with her West Side Story, obviously she's a big name now. One of the, what's his name? Sergey Brin. He's one of the co-founders of Google.
Wow, and yeah,
he's
people
an
don't think
immigrant.
about that. Yeah.
Or even Levi Strauss.
Yes.
Love
Yes.
my Levi's. So, and he like has changed everything when it comes to jeans and like the stuff that we wear. But all of these people have come from other countries, come to America, planted some roots down, and they're the complete opposite. We're not getting anybody's worse. We actually got the best, and
We
they
got a
made
lot
our
of their
country
best.
better for it.
And I think that's what makes, again, that statement so disheartening is that for every immigrant, every, hyphenated American, and by that I mean Mexican American, Italian American, German American, Polish American, you know, that has contributed to this country, quite frankly, even African Americans who've contributed to this country in such profound ways. We forget about so many of the inventions that we take for granted that were created by slaves or descendants of slaves. And at the core of that, they were African Americans because they came from Africa, and then they immigrated here. Whether it was their choice or not, they brought their skills, their abilities, their resources, their resourcefulness to this nation. And so I don't feel like there is, enough credit given to that group, nor do I feel like we should constantly be reminded of the negativity of that group.
So it also depends, I think, on how like Americans view specific countries too, because there are certain immigrants that are considered the ideal immigrants. Like when you think of Chinese immigrants, they come over and they work hard and they thrive, they create their own businesses, they help for their families, they help, America. But then there are some immigrants who they consider are the worst.
Right.
So I don't, I think that's kind of interesting. So I would guess, how do you think Americans viewed the Wakanda?
It's funny because when the film started and they spoke about the king being killed, and they described the country he was from, and they were like, Wakanda is one of the poorest third world countries, on the globe.
Right.
And then they continue to describe this country, which they had no idea about, because it seems like very quickly they transition to this scene where we see them in their really technologically advanced spaceship, if you will, flying into Africa, rescuing. They even make a stop so that they could rescue a whole nother group of Africans.
Right.
Get back on their ship and then transition to their secret society, the secluded nation, where it's very utopian. It's like the best Africa you could ever possibly want for, because they're so advanced and they're so knowledgeable, and they have so much to offer, but it's like a protective mechanism for them. They decide they intentionally decide to put a veil around themselves and protect what they have, because maybe I'm thinking, they see how the world sees diversity, and to protect their way of living and not be exploited, they chose to allow everybody else to think of them as less than, even though they knew they were much more.
And that's kind of funny because there was a TED Talk with Chimamanda Adichie, who you would know. Beyonce used her quote in Flawless, feminism, that one. And she had this TED Talk about how when she came to America, everybody had this view of Nigeria, where she's from. Like they were like, oh, you don't know how to speak, or you speak perfect English, like play me the songs of your tribe. And she's like, okay, well, I'll play you a Mariah Carey tape, because they're not a third world,
very stereotyped.
And that's what's funny, like, we have these ideas of other nations that almost really aren't true.
Yeah, almost like Mean Girls in the scene where Katie, played by
from Africa,
played by Lindsay Lohan, comes in, sits down, and they say, we have we have a new student today, all the way from Africa, and the Tina Fey's character, the teacher, looks directly at this
The
black
girl.
girl who's wearing, some indigenous, clothing or
Right.
whatever,
And she's
but she's
like,
like,
"Welcome."
welcome, and she's like, I'm
from
Chi-
Michigan.
or Michigan, and it's actually Lindsay Lohan, the white girl,
Right.
that's from Africa.
It's those perceptions. I think that's what's crazy.
Yeah.
And then I think this film comes at like
a pivotal moment,
right
in our country,
in society, because you have
absolutely.
This is also during the time where President Trump put that executive order out to ban certain countries from sending their immigrants in.
Right.
And so here you have a movie that's starring African country. I think one of the actors is from Chad, and Chad is one of the countries that's on the list of countries that can't come.
Yeah, and if I can interject, it's interesting too because that the whole, if you know about the behind the scenes, every actor that they used to represent Wakanda and the different tribes, they intentionally again chose people that were African, but from different
Africas.
Different Africas, different countries in Africa to show even diversity within that nation. And it was such a beautiful thing. And I know that people might say I'm saying that because I'm black and whatever. I'm not African American because I myself didn't immigrate from Africa. So I'm an American, and I can just appreciate the beauty of seeing something that has been overlooked.
Yeah, and then going along with that, this is also at the same time as Wonder Woman coming out.
Right.
This is a female
empowerment
lead, but she's also an Israeli actress.
Yes.
And we're starting to see more of like the nations that we used to fear. We see more of their actors coming forward, like Dev Patel. But we only knew him from Slumdog Millionaire, but now he's being out there. You have the character from Big Bang Theory or Silicon Valley. We have some Indian Americans, some Middle Eastern Americans.
I think the thing that is probably hard is that with all of that, it's great. It just takes so long.
Yeah.
Everything gets, it's progressive, but our progression takes so much time. It's okay to take time, but I think that's why we're in a space that we're in. That's why statements like President Trump's statement is so significant, because you look at a person like that who's come from wealth, who's seen the world but hasn't seen the world.
Right, and his own wife is an immigrant.
Right.
So I think that's what makes it really funny and really fascinating. But I think overall, I'm glad that I caught this one moment in the movie, because the movie was already a politically charged movie as it is. Yeah. But just even this one thing has like so much to go off of, and just so much to think about. So thank you for joining me
thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Until next time. See you later.
See ya.